Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're joining us from North America or Latin America, and welcome to today's webinar, which is No Longer Alternative, the future of local payment methods is here. We're going to give it a couple more minutes just to let people get online and get ready for the webinar to begin. So please stay with us. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and good morning if you're joining us from North America, Latin America. Indeed, good evening if you're joining us from Asia. Welcome to today's webinar, which is titled No Longer Alternative, the future of local payment methods is here. My name is Alan Moss. I'm responsible for marketing at Mura Systems. We're a leading supplier of mobile payment technology since about 2008. And certainly we've seen a lot of interest in contactless and NFC payments as convenient and a safe way of paying in these times of coronavirus. Be it in-store, outside, or at the curbside, increasingly with click and collect, or even in the use of self-service kiosks. We're certainly seeing a lot of different ways to pay in person. As you know, the webinar is organized by Merchant Payments Ecosystem. And early last month, we had an online event called the Summer Week, which brought together 1,800 professionals from merchant or technology providers for a whole week, together with 40 industry influencers and experts. Unfortunately, we won't be able to have a face-to-face MP in February of next year, which is what's been the case for previous years, but we're certainly looking forward to a full online event, which will be taking place at the same time in February. So today we have almost 280 people registered for the webinar. We've received a number of questions and we'll get onto those a little bit later. But just before we start, I wanted to take a step back and look at where we stand today from an economic perspective. Despite some of the doom and gloom perhaps that's been catching up with us in the past couple of weeks, I thought it was interesting to see that both in the US and the UK, retail sales continued to grow in September at rates of between 5 and 6% compared with last year. If you look at Visa's forecast, and obviously they're very much involved with spending at the point of sale as well as online, their view on the GDP is that it's possibly going to slow a bit in Q4, but still staying at close to 4%. And I think what we've seen, at least in Europe, with recent lockdown measures, is that some degree of slowdown is probably inevitable. I've also been tracking some of the figures coming out of ACI research recently on global e-commerce transactions. And the latest figures coming out this month have shown that online transactions continue to increase at a very rapid pace. So we're talking about over 20% year on year through September. But what we do know is that that's not even across regions. And even if purchase value or total volume in the US was up at 17%, in the case of EMEA, it's just under half that at 8%. But what they do see, and for me this is very interesting, they see an acceleration to a 27% increase in global e-commerce over the holiday period, starting more or less from now through to the end of December of this year. The data they put together based on hundreds of millions of e-commerce transactions across the globe also showed an increase expected in buy online, pick up in the store, so BOPIS, or otherwise known as click and collect, where in fact 40% increase was seen in this specific payment method as people get into the holiday shopping channel and are expected to do more of their shopping online, but still go to store to collect. Now, coming back to the webinar, as you know, this event is sponsored by Le Monétique. Le Monétique enables the new world of payment and provides a platform that supports PSPs, acquirers, payment facilitators, marketplaces, and merchants. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We have Marcia Cilliers, who's the specialist partner at consultancy BE, as well as being a board advisor and non-exec director at Le Monétique. Marcia has over 25 years experience in payments, working with blue chip as well as fintech organizations. Currently, she provides advice to companies on e-commerce, marketplaces, m-commerce, mobile payments, and fraud management. I'd also like to introduce Christophe Bourbier, who's the CEO and co-founder of Le Monétique since 2007. Before that, he was a consultant with Capgemini, as well as having a fairly active career as an entrepreneur, setting up a number of organizations from a phone marketing company to a TV channel for business creators and a marketplace for plastic surgeons. So at this point in time, please let me hand you over to Marcia to start us off with a presentation. Marcia.
Thank you very much, Alan. So thank you very much all for joining, and a wonderful introduction there, Alan. I think it's, you know, some of the statistics you mentioned earlier do put things in perspective. Reality is many of us have been shopping online in the past decade, and probably even more so in the last 6 months, 8 months of various lockdowns, restrictions, and so forth. As we do that, we do shop internationally, but we also shop locally. And we have certain ways of purchasing in our countries that we got used to. UK is probably not the best example, being a very much card-oriented society. But even in UK, customers pay increasingly with PayPal. It's much easier checkout. Mobile wallets, that's what the youngsters like, and bank transfers increasingly. So here's some of the recent news that our teams have picked up. We've heard that China UnionPay is now issuing more cards than the schemes, the international schemes, Visa, MasterCard. We see how the digital wallets are being increasingly used in many markets, especially in Asia. We'll talk a little bit about later. We see that effectively the alternative payment methods are very much becoming the prominent driver in payments, both locally and internationally. So roughly, and it depends who you're talking to, I am happy to put the number of payment methods at about 250 out there. You will have heard some people call it as many as 450. I would argue that that's when you count a card in each acceptance in each particular country. Reality is there are hundreds of payment methods. Some of them have international prominence. Some of them are very, very local or very specific to a particular demographic and a particular sector. And this, again, there's a lot of mixed statistics about it, but again, it averages out at around, we see 50% of global e-commerce made with non-card payment methods. Now, that is an incredible number. If you think about it, then 15 years ago, that number probably was 5%. So the statistics that we picked from a range of payment reports, you can see how the cards are declining over time. You also see the prominence of the wallets. The interesting one to pick up for me is the blue one, which is the post-pay. So installment payments at the moment are enjoying quite a big rise, considering, and again, we'll talk a little bit about it later. If you do have any questions, then please do feel free to put them into the Q&A chat box, and we will look at addressing those at the end of the section, by the way. So let's have a look. So I'm talking about all these payment methods, and it becomes quite difficult. So how do you decide which of 250 payment methods to use? How do you, what do they all mean? So to make it easy for you, we try to break them into 6 buckets, so to speak. When we look at, there's cards, debit, credit, local, like Union Pay or Carte Bleue, international, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, for example. So those are the cards. They tend, even though there might be different networks, the cards will tend to operate in a very similar way. Then we've got the wallets. And the wallets vary a lot. It's probably one of the broadest categories of payments. It could be, again, global international wallets like PayPal, which is, in fact, in terms of the actual payment method, maybe connected to your card, to your bank account, or indeed a prepaid amount or an amount transferred to you by others. Or it could be mobile wallets, which are more often connected just to your card. So it's effectively making it easier for you to pay without the need for a PIN at the point of sale because you're using your fingerprint. And there's some very local wallets like Kiwi Wallet in Russia and Eastern Europe, or WeChat Pay and Alipay in Asia. Now, the third most interesting area that I want to call out is the bank transfer payments. Again, the history of those is very broad, depending on market to market. For example, GiroPay in Germany or Ideal in Holland have been going around for more than a decade and have been used for a very large portion of local transactions. Again, some statistics put Ideal as much as 80–90% of local Dutch transactions. Then there are some payment methods, like we put, for example, there a SEPA, which is effectively a standard within EU. And it's not just one provider, there's multiple providers that can support that payment method. And there's a lot of newcomers in this sector. Now, with open banking in Europe, there's been a big rise in abilities to pay directly from your bank account. It could be effectively a merchant that would accept your bank payment without actually using a branded payment. And then the fourth, we have the prepaid. Again, this is an area that has developed especially to cover some demographics or some markets where there wasn't many cards or bank accounts or wallets. PaySafe card is a good example, which also acquired UCash, which is a very prominent payment method in the Middle East, for example. Or it could be targeting a particular vertical. The examples there, eNet and WEX, are the prepaid schemes which help airlines, OTAs, and hotels exchange value between themselves. And finally, this is probably the most, again, interesting in that it's become quite fashionable payment method now for many retailers I talk to. Post-pay or installment is seems to have been quite a new thing. But actually, if you look around, it's not a very new thing because it existed in some markets like France or Germany for the last 2 or 3 decades. The markets where the cards haven't been used or credit cards haven't been used, people used installment payments to buy things like a fridge and car. Whilst in UK, we'll probably get a new credit card and put it on loan. But this has seen somewhat of a rebirth, and we do see some new brands, very much talked about Klarna, for example, Afterpay in Australia, Divido, many others. And we are seeing a lot, again, with open banking, this is allowing merchants to work directly with the banks in order to offer loans at the point of sale. So this is a really interesting area for us. But then and for other, again, the reason we have to have these buckets is because when you look at the statistics, there's some payment methods that don't fit into any of the category we talked about. But definitely cash on delivery. You can argue cash on delivery is not alternative payment method at all, but cash on delivery is actually a prominent method in many countries. In some countries in Eastern Europe, it's actually evolved into a reasonably sleek experience. If that could be said about cash. This could be tokens, vouchers, travelers' checks, and such. So what does that mean locally? So I've given you examples of the payment method.
Masha?
Yep.
Masha, sorry to interrupt you. There is an interesting question on Q&A about, wallet. The question is about wallet at the end. It goes back to credit card in a way. So is it really, are these wallets really alternative payments?
It's a very good question indeed. So I can't see that particular question.
It is in the chat actually. It is in the chat.
Okay. There we go. Sorry, guys. If you can put the questions into the questions rather than the chat, I think it's a little bit easier to see them then. Indeed, and that's been my argument about 10, 15 years ago when, in fact, PayPal originally was a merchant. Then it became an alternative payment method. But all the while, the actual payment was always taken from your card. So effectively, it was a checkout method by which, where a secure wallet, if you like, where you stored your card details. And then when you bought something, that money amount was pulled out. I would argue that, yes, the most of the wallets that I talked about, like Apple Pay, Google Pay, and so forth, these are connected to the cards, but increasingly these companies are looking to connect to local banks so that they effectively do away with the middleman of a scheme and allow people to pay directly from their bank account with their phone or with whatever is the access to the wallet they have. So to that question, yes, you could argue that the cards are still powering many of these alternative payment methods, but as consumers get used to those brands, and PayPal is a good example here. PayPal preferred option is pushing your bank account a payment rather than a card. Once they become consumer brands, then they are somewhat, in the driver's seat in terms of how they're going to decide to pull the money into their account. So, well, initially they might be using the schemes, and then they'll be looking into their own tools. Again, some of the similar type of setups I've seen when I used to work at Microsoft, for example, we had Microsoft Points. Again, initially you buy them with cards, and then we looked into getting some tokens bought at cash points in various countries and so forth. So I guess it's a mixture of both. But I do feel that the wallets on their own are also becoming a very powerful tool because of sheerly the experience that consumers are having. So now I'd like to have a quick look at some of the markets. And I think there's some interesting dynamics in different markets. So I'm not going to call out all the stats, nor am I aiming to name every logo we've got on that busy page. But as an example, Europe, as I talked about before, cards are still quite prominent, driven by some of the key markets, big card markets such as UK, France for debit cards, Poland. And then, of course, there are countries like Germany, Holland, Belgium, where bank transfers are a lot more dominant. Prepaid and postpay are quite low considering. Again, I believe that there's going to be a much bigger growth. And you see that there's predictions that the buy now, pay later is expected to grow up to by 2023 by about 9%. An important one to mention here, I've mentioned France, and my colleague Christophe will be talking later. France was a market where installment payments have been really well established for a long time now. And it is the way the consumers pay. They didn't expect, they don't think it's cool or anything. It's just that the way people got used to paying for certain items. So it's quite interesting to see this rebirth of that particular payment method. And I think this time it's been labeled, rather than just the credit, it's also the smoothness of transaction, like with Clara. The fact that you can check out very quickly, you don't have to put any data, and then in the background they work out your a risk profile, and in the background they work out how to charge you, whether it's going to be an invoice or an immediate payment. We move to the North America and Canada. You can see the cards are still majority of the payments. However, we do see again a big growth in wallets. There is still a lot of payments by cash and checks, which is the other bit there. The bank transfer is a lot lower, but there are some interesting post-pay payments, such as bill me later and those kind of initiatives, which are getting people really interested in looking at the ways of obtaining consumer credit in different ways. There are and a new technology. Interestingly, contactless hadn't been a big thing in the US, for example, until the mobile wallets were launched. Whilst here in UK, we were used to contactless much before the mobile payments came in. Asia Pacific, unsurprisingly, that big dark part of the circle there, 58% is wallets. There's a big, obviously, impact of Alipay, WeChat with the huge population in China. There are some cards. There's a lot of local cards, again mentioned before, Union Pay, for example. But definitely the wallets and the younger population profile of many of these countries, especially China, is really interested. Many of them don't have cards. They don't have access to a bank account. But they will have mobile phone, so they have a wallet on their mobile phone. Latin America, again, the cards are quite strong in those markets. However, there are many local cards and local schemes as well. So you can see the post-pay is particularly large in Latin America. There are some payment methods, with Boleto, and there's also Mercado Pago in Argentina, allowing those. We don't see as many wallets there as yet, but I think again there's a lot of difference between countries in Latin America, and I think there's particular local setups that have taken very deep root, and these companies have ability to launch a range of products because their brand is very well known. And Middle East and Africa, I did mention prepaid was quite a big area. Again, cards is pretty much evenly split, with cash still being quite a big payment method. There's also some local vouchers available there as well. So I'm trying to navigate technology there with the questions. Oh. Philip, am I still controlling it? I'm struggling to change this for some reason. Oh, there we go. So as I pointed before, I think that the reality is, and we're talking about the alternative payment methods and how do you decide which payment method is suitable. It really depends on the particular markets that the merchant is selling their goods and services. It depends on the types of products or services. And really, there's no solution that fits it all. And we see that each, I've got the boxes there for the continents, but actually, if you think about it, within Europe, there's such a variety of different payments. But what we do see is that there's some payments are definitely on the rise. There's a lot more new payments being launched all the time. Again, I talked to my French colleagues. There's a lot of French-specific prepaid schemes. There's specific, for example, lunch vouchers and such. Whilst they don't seem to be particularly important to merchants in UK, but if you happen to be selling to demographic in France that is using those payment methods, they are a must for you to succeed. And a good example is somebody like Deliveroo. They might be delivering, the food, and it's not necessarily a company with roots in France. However, because of in France, you have these lunch vouchers the government supports you for. When you buy lunch, you want to use the voucher. If you can't use the voucher, you're not going to be ordering that particular pizza. So it would stop you from being able to entering the market successfully. So I think it's very important to understand which markets you're going to, depending on the products and the mix of services, which payment methods should be done, and really then working out, well, what is the best way? How can you aggregate all those 250 payment methods or a fraction thereof for your particular organization? So I think at this point, I'll hand you over to Christoph, who will talk about how Limonetic has been doing this.
Thank you, Masha, for that detailed introduction. Masha, maybe there is a Q&A for you, two Q&A for you. Maybe you might want to answer them. One
Okay,
is about,
I'll see. Maybe I'll answer within the chat as well while you're talking.
All right. So thanks, Masha. So Limonetic, just a funny, quick, funny feedback on how we launched Limonetic a few years ago. So Limonetic, we launched our company because we bet a few years ago that alternative payments then would overtake credit card. And I do remember that at that time, again, it was 10 years ago, we had a presentation in front of bank people. And those guys, when they have discovered Limonetic, they told us that anyway, credit card would remain everywhere anyway, or that GAFA would be the leader of payment method, and then that GAFA would overtake every other local payment method that could exist in Europe or in Africa or anywhere else in the world. And finally, what happened is that GAFA have launched their own payment method, their Amazon Pay, their Google Pay, their Apple Pay, and so on. But still, they have not overtaken everything in the world. And you still find a lot of new initiatives in every countries all around the world. That's very funny. That's very funny. There is no leader in a way there, even though we can see a lot of amazing payment method coming from Asia or from US for sure, but no international leader yet. So back to Limonetic. Limonetic, we are a payment platform that gives access, thanks to one API, to 250 different payment methods around the world. So that's an API that can be integrated by gateways, that can be integrated by acquirers, but also be integrated by merchant directly or marketplace, like Deliveroo. And that very easy to integrate API gives a lot of other functionalities that I'm going to describe. So 250 payment method that we have, and we have those payment method. I'm trying to move. I believe I've got the right to, yeah, it's coming. Okay. And so we have 250 different payment method from different typology and also from different countries. So we have most of the different typology of payment method connected. We have, of course, some local scheme payments. We do also Visa, MasterCard, but we have some very local credit card scheme connected. We have wallets. Most of the biggest one are connected to Limonetic. We have payment by installment, as Masha described. We have also a lot of payment, debit payment, as we say, SDD type of payment, and also a lot of prepaid payments. We have most of the important payment in Europe, but we are covering also 60 different countries in the world, including Europe, of course, but also some countries in Latin, doing some payment in US, doing some payment in South Africa, in North Africa, doing some payment in India, direct banking payment in Asia, in South Korea, in Australia, in China, in Japan, and so on. So 250 payment methods in 60 different countries. And those payment methods can be B2C payment method, but also B2B type of payment method that are most of the time a bit different from what a B2C payment method. And so what we do for those payment methods is that we do the processing of those payment methods. We connect technically to those payment methods first as a gateway, but for some of them, we also do the collecting of those payment methods. So we aggregate the funds coming from those different payment methods and make sure that the settlement that will be done to the merchant will be a unique and very easy to understand settlement, aggregating all the settlement of the payment method themselves. Then we offer a very easy to understand reconciliation, just to make sure that it is easy for a merchant to understand how much has been processed and how much money has to be received, or how much money is still expected to be received from the different payment method. And then in some cases, when it comes to marketplaces, then we can also help to connect those payment methods to marketplaces, as we did for Deliveroo as an example, where it's a bit different, because for marketplaces, you don't just need to receive the money somewhere and make sure you have been correctly settled by the payment method, but you also need to send that money to the different vendors of the marketplace. And sometimes on the marketplace, you can have some what we call mixed product basket. So for one transaction, you might have 1 or 2 or 3 different products in one single transaction. And there you need to play with the flow of funds that comes in and the flow of funds that will be paid out and settled to the vendors. And all payment methods are not completely organized or set up to be okay with marketplace setup. Okay, so Limonetiq, a technical player, definitely, to do processing, but also a collecting player that can aggregate funds, and a solution that is well organized to play with marketplace as well when it comes to payout, complex payout of payment, and also KYC and onboardings of vendors. All right. So Limonetiq, we work, as I said, we are a full service solution with a lot of payment method. And yes, we work for merchants directly, like on our marketplaces directly. And we have a lot of examples of marketplace and merchant that have integrated our API to have access to all those payment methods and also to marketplace functionalities. And you have the list of the merchant and marketplace that use Limonetiq just in front of you here. But Limonetiq is really famous for its white label type of services. Means that at Limonetiq, we work for merchant, as I said. We offer our API and back office to the merchants and marketplaces, but we also work a lot for different payment players of the industry. So we work for gateways, like for instance, Worldline or Ingenico or ACI, that integrate Limonetiq API to have more payment method to offer to their own merchants, but also to acquirers or financial institution, payment institution that might want also to offer more payment method in what they do on a day-to-day basis. So a full service solution for merchant and marketplace, international ones, but also a white label solution that will be used by payment player of the industry, like gateways and acquirers. And what we launched last year, in 2019 actually, was to start doing in-store here what we have been doing online for years. So what we started last year is to offer that connectivity to alternative payments, not only to gateways and acquirers, but also to point of sale solution and to cashier software developers, cashier software providers. And so now you can use also the API of Limonetiq online, but also to offer some in-store QR code, alternative QR code payment type of user experience, a QR code that will be scanned either by the point of sale solution or by the scan of the cashier software directly. Okay, so different typology of clients. And one of them that is also very important at Limonetiq, in addition to merchants, to marketplace, to payment player of the industry, and in-store type of players like cashier software and POS, one client at Limonetiq is a very important one, is payment method themselves. So a lot of payment methods come to see Limenetic for different reasons. A lot of payment methods come to see Limenetic because for some of them, they were used to be
Christoph, I think we lost you there. Can you try speaking again, Christoph?
Hello, can you hear me again?
Now we can hear you.
Yeah.
We lost you a couple of minutes back.
Yes, and I know why. Sorry for that, guys. So payment method. So what we do for payment method, we have some clients like payment by installment, prepaid payments, wallet payments that either wants to launch their services online because they used to be maybe payment method that were well organized and that could answer correctly some in-store needs. So they were well organized to match with the in-store user experience. But once they want to go online, life online is a bit different from what you can experience when you are a payment method that is used in-store. And online, as I've briefly mentioned, it's a very different world than in-store world. Online world is a very heterogeneous world where you have a lot of different gateways where you have to connect to be available and accepted by a merchant. You have a lot of files to exchange with those gateways. You have some marketplaces sometimes that requires some specific needs in terms of flow of funds management. And that's where Limenetic comes into the picture. So what we offer to payment method is thanks to one connection to Limenetic, those payment method first will be directly, immediately connected to the dozen of gateways and cash software provider that Limenetic is connected to. So one connection to Limenetic gives access to payment methods that are connected to Limenetic, give access to all the gateways, and therefore all the merchants that will be using those gateways. And so it will be a super time to market a service that will be that we offer to payment method, because they don't have to reconnect to every single gateways that that Limenetic is already connected to. So one connectivity to Limenetic gives access to dozens of gateways, to dozens of cashier software, and also to POS solution. And on the top of that, on that connectivity, as I previously said, Limenetic also gives some additional services that some payment method might be missing. For instance, some payment method might be missing some collecting services. Collecting services means what? For instance, if you are a payment method and you want to connect, let's say, to Molly, Molly is a full service gateway. So it means that Molly is going to receive the money and is going to send that money to the different vendors that are using Molly. But as a payment method, if you are not organized to work with this typology of gateway that collect themselves the money before they send it out to merchant, then you are not going to be able to connect to those full service or collecting gateways. And so Limenetic will help those payment methods that are not organized to work with collecting services or collecting gateways to easily connect to them. We are going to help them to manage the flow of funds. We are going to help them also to onboard the vendors that will be onboarded by the gateway themselves. And we will convert a non-collecting payment method into a collecting payment method. And that is a very important service to have, or functionality to have if you want to deploy online. Marketplace as well, we mentioned them. marketplace is not a standard type of merchant. A merchant receives the money and that's it. A marketplace has to receive the money and send that money to different vendors. And when a buyer buys on a marketplace, most of the time, with one transaction, they are going to buy not one product, but one or two or three different products through one single transaction. And some payment method don't know how to handle that complexity that lies behind this single transaction with multi vendors or multi product. And here Limonetics can help a lot as well, those payment method to be compliant with a marketplace model. Then last but not least, some payment method like prepaid payments, like meal vouchers, like travel vouchers, like gift card, like eco vouchers, those payment method, when they are used in store, it's very easy because you have some money on one card. And if on that prepaid card, you don't have enough money to pay the overall product or service that you want to buy in store, then the cashier, the woman behind the cashier will help you to do the top up, to do the split payment, will help you to complete the price that you had with your prepaid payment with a credit card payment. But online, it's very complex to manage that because it's complex for a merchant to handle one prepaid payments with a credit card payments or with a PayPal payments or with a Banco Mr. Cash payments. And so Limonetics can help as well prepaid payments, as I've mentioned them, meal vouchers, travel vouchers, eco gift cards, to be very easily accepted online and to manage what we call that split payment or a split tender, as people might say, online. And we make sure that for the merchant, for the marketplace, or for the gateway that will be using that solution, is going to be very, very easy for them to accept those complex payment methods. Okay, so to sum up, I would say, so Limonetics, you have understood, thanks to our single API, we give access to all those 250 payment methods all around the world. And we do that for gateways, acquirers, payment institution, marketplaces and merchants. But one of our big clients as well will be payment method that wants to innovate, that want to become digital, that wants to launch and accelerate online and be immediately connected through all the different gateways and payment players that exist online.
Good stuff. Thank you
Thanks.
very much, Christophe. Thank you also for Marcia for your introduction on alternative payment methods. We've now got time for a little bit of Q&A. And I really wanted to come back to one of the points that Marcia raised, which was kind of touching on alternative payment methods, local payment methods. And for me, I guess, I'd say, what really is the difference? When is it an alternative payment method versus a local payment method? Is it a question of local customer preference? Are there indeed some APMs which are now becoming global? So Marcia, is that a question that you can answer?
Sure. I think it depends on depends on your point of view. In what I've seen, many companies in payment acceptance, PSPs, have quietly migrated their terminology from APMs to LPMs. Right. I think the tipping point was when there were more card issued by what used to be called an alternative payment method that I referred to before as Union Card. So I think there's one is more, terminology, and I do believe that alternative somehow implies small or lesser, and for that, alternative payment methods is no longer a descriptive name for these local payment methods. But also, I think, as you say, there's this other caveat that local payment methods sometimes are not international. And sometimes they're very much just local, like we talked about Balletto, we talked about so your Kiwi wallet and so forth. So I think it's a bit of both, but I really think that I guess we need to think of new terminology moving forward. They're all payments and they're all valid for different markets. It really is becoming very much a consumer-driven choice for merchants which payment methods to offer.
Yeah, and I guess at the end of the day, if people are coming in wanting to pay with a certain local or alternative payment method, then a merchant either in-store or online is going to have to support it. To me, the interesting thing is also when we're starting talking about APMs, there's a lot of focus on wallets, typically e-wallets. And I was interested in those statistics that you showed, because to me, it seemed like Asia Pacific was way ahead of other parts of the world in terms of e-wallet adoption. I think it was 60% of e-commerce transactions versus around 25% in Europe. Why is that big difference? I mean, I can think of a couple of big Asian schemes that possibly answer that, but what's your view on that, Masha? Why are e-wallets so
it's
far
pretty
ahead
much.
of Asia?
It is, well, with that said, I mean, it is absolutely China. You know, it's a huge growth economy with younger demographics that are using Chinese payment wallets. So I'd say that's the biggest driver. But with that, not to underestimate the rest of Asia. If you look around Malaysia, Indonesia, you know, there are some local payment methods often based off mobile, and therefore they would fall into that mobile wallet category. I mean, there's a question earlier as well about crypto. Now, crypto is becoming quite a big growth area in some industries. So we do see a lot of online businesses, especially in kind of financial services, looking into crypto. I've seen a few airlines launching Bitcoins and whatnot. I haven't seen a shop yet asking you to pay with crypto. I have seen a shop, I don't know if you guys have been to some designer shops recently, but having popped into Bond Street, I noticed that most of the designer shops had Alipay at the point of sale. So I think there's the payments will lend themselves to different scenarios as well.
So are you saying, Marsha, that we're going to see Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies coming in online or in store as the next alternative payment method?
I'm not sure. Personally, I'm a bit skeptical about that. I think it's like with everything, right? In payments, there's this big debate about, well, we talk about these new payment methods being phased in all the time, but the old ones are not being phased out. And I was just talking to somebody who's working at Visa with Transport for London. There's a big challenge for Transport for London. They keep having to accept new payment methods, but they're not being able to get rid of any. The only ones that we've tried to get rid of in UK was checks, and even that had backfired and had to be brought back for particular demographic and particular scenarios. So I think crypto has a particular corner of the online transactions. I think there's a lot, and again, depending on the countries, depending on the service, I think they do earn a bit of a bad name with some of the fraudsters using them for kind of cashing out and demanding money of people. So, but I think there's a particularly valid place for them. I'm not sure about in store yet. I don't know if Christoph, you have a different opinion.
No different opinion about that Bitcoin. We used to have that actually. We used to have that Bitcoin functionality or acceptance online, and we at the beginning we did that for some marketing reasons, and then maybe we thought it could attract some clients, but no clients. I mean, all clients mainly are in airlines, travel, traditional retail, food delivery, and so on. And in those vertical, crypto is not yet an issue. Is not yet very well used, I would say, or not used at all. And your question was about in-store. I'm still a bit skeptical. Maybe depending on the shop, maybe, but for a traditional shop, I'm a bit skeptical about the usage of cryptocurrencies in the next 5 years, I would say. Let's see. Let's see what's going to happen.
Understood. And we've talked a lot about stores well, actually physical stores or online. But the last webinar, Christoph and Marsha, we talked about marketplaces and the role of Limonetique in the marketplace model. So I was kind of wondering, what are you seeing for alternative payments in marketplaces Is that more in demand than individual online or physical stores, Christoph? What's your view on that?
Well, marketplace is a very sexy and attractive market. I mean, there are marketplaces that are it's really booming. What we see about marketplaces, that those marketplaces, for most of them, they have very international reach. I mean, you're not building a marketplace just to be local. You build a marketplace with a lot of vendors, suppliers, because you want to be very quickly international. And back to what we said before, and what the figures that Masha shared with us, we can see that if you want to match local needs of payments, then there is not magic behind that. You have to offer the good, correct set of payment method that will match with the correct local needs and usage of payments. And that's why marketplace, maybe more than any other merchant, because they are very international, because they have an international reach, therefore they will need to have a lot of local or alternative payment method connected. And what I say here is true for B2C international marketplaces, but also B2B marketplace that wants to be launched, that wants to launch also new services in B2B. Yeah,
that certainly makes sense. We had another very good question actually from Yolanda, and Masha, this is probably coming back to some of the figures that you showed, where we could see bank transfers as a kind of decreasing factor. But Yolanda's asking, what about open banking PSD2? Won't it accelerate bank transfer payments? So what's your view on that, Masha?
Absolutely. I think, there's obviously the statistics. I think earlier question was quite good about, well, there's actually some of the wallets reporting, does it not also include the card transaction at the back of it? So I think, we do see, absolutely, in Europe, bank transfers are growing. I mean, I had an amazing experience the other day. So a few months ago, I transferred some money to a relative in Hungary through TransferWise, and I had to wait 3 days for the money to clear from my account for TransferWise to send it. I did it a couple of weeks ago, and they did the PISB, so the open banking. So basically, I clicked it, went through my bank, clicked it, and about an hour later got a call from my relative that the money was received. I thought that was quite, I mean, being in payments myself, I talk about it at events, but seeing it in practice, I was very, very well impressed, I must say. So absolutely, I mean, there was another question here about, can you accept open banking payments at point of sale? There's nothing stopping you from it. I mean, definitely, and it could be done through a mobile wallet. It could be done through a mobile banking app. It could be done through QR code. We've not seen that much development in that area, but I've seen more online. But I do see pretty much all the large payment service providers are launching their own kind of PISP, so payment initiate a payment service or method. So I see this as a future. I see as, large department store. Why can't I have a John Lewis payment? Why do I need? And I think this is back to the conversation about the middleman. The schemes were there as a cloud. They were there since the 50s because there was no cloud connecting all the different players together. Now there's a lot of technology that can connect people together, and therefore, in some cases, that's what these payment methods are based on, a different type of cloud. That could be SEPA, that could be open banking, could be SWIFT for the B2B. So, I mean, definitely, I think that decrease was probably because of the overall growth in, that was the percentages of the share, whilst the actual growth there is, in the dollar numbers, there's still a lot of growth in bank transfer.
Yeah, I certainly think that makes sense.
Sorry, it's difficult to compare it to the growth of Chinese wallets. That's why.
No, absolutely. But I mean, you were touching on an interesting point there, I think, which is the economics, and clearly the European Commission and others were probably focused on the existing, credit card charges or debit card charges from the major international networks when they started pushing for things like open banking and PSD2. But we also have another question focused on economics here, and this is the very specific one. So Frederic Syrier, thank you for submitting this one. So Christophe, Marcia, this is for you both. Do you have a view on the different costs?
I'd like to start maybe, and I'll pass on
payment?
to Christophe to talk about the APMs, but I'd like to start. I mean, yeah, that was a question I had on my screen. I really wanted to tackle that one. Frederic, there's no such thing as cash being free, first of all, right? Cash costs in terms of, it will cost in terms of security. It costs in terms of, I mean, as a retailer, if you accept cash, basically you have to pay somebody to come in and collect the cash of you. That's a cost. There is a lot of studies, and I'll happily send it to you in terms of the actual cost of cash. And trust me, many of the more virtual payments are basing their kind of pricing, benchmarking it on the price of cash. Also, you know, when you clear the cash into your bank account, often you'll have bank account fees. Then if you want to pay your suppliers, if you want to withdraw the cash, you'll have to pay fees. Or there's obviously risk of you carrying around suitcases to pay and so forth. You know, I think that's on just to make it clear. So cash does have a cost attached to it. On the in terms of the payments for each payment method, absolutely, there's a really big range of fees. And for example, some prepaid schemes I've seen charge as much as 10% for the privilege of using them as a mechanism to often like a B2B payment versus a debit card, for example, in Europe, which is regulated and which is 20 basis points or plus few pennies. So I think, and yeah, there's a lot, and this is also very important consideration when deciding which payment to put to the front of your store. Because in some cases, again, paying with PayPal is easier; it's an easier click. But do you want PayPal will cost you more than a card, and definitely more than a bank transfer. So, would you, for certain goods and services, would it make sense for you to put that payment method first versus some which are cheaper for you? And I definitely work with a lot of clients and consulting them to understand, you know, which payment methods do you make available for a particular product in a particular country. There's definitely a lot of thinking that needs to be to go into it.
But Marcia, then what are the key criteria for that? I mean, what are the issues that merchants should consider when they're looking at new APMs or local payment methods?
As I said, probably don't have that time. It takes a lot of criteria to look into. But I say the basic, you know, what's the average transaction value? It's a very, very basic example. Many bank transfers are flat fee, right? And the cards are percentage fee. So the higher your value, like a B2B transaction of $1 million, you wouldn't really want to put it through a cross-border credit card, paying 1.44% interchange, whilst you would probably prefer to do it with a separate transfer and paying a few pounds at most. So it will depend on, but it also depends on whether that payment method is suitable for the demographic whom you're targeting with your product. Because you might prefer, as I said, and that's the reason more expensive payment methods like Amex or PayPal exist. Because if I were to the consumers prefer them for some good reasons for them, whether it's collecting miles or the fact that it's a one-click checkout. So as a merchant, you have to consider the pros and cons of paying more for a particular payment method, because if it increases your sales by 10%, then it's worth it, right? So as I said, it's quite a complex decision-making process. And I have worked with many retailers where we make that decision. Literally, we look at dynamic payment pages where we put the rules. So for the certain amount, for example, of a basket, you push a particular payment method. Or if a customer is on your site the first time, you'll let them check out with some, I mean, I'm picking on PayPal here, probably unfairly, but you'll let them check out with an easy checkout but expensive payment method. And yet the next time you'll offer them a different payment method because you know they've already got into you.
But at the end of the day, it sounds like the consumer gets to decide and everyone else is following on from there.
Yeah, as a merchant, you guide the consumer as much as you can, but then the consumer definitely guides you with a.
As long as the experience is seamless, and certainly it sounded like you had a good experience with your SEPA payment, so that's good news. Now we've run out of time, which is a real shame because I think we could have kept going a lot longer with the Q&A. But I'd like to thank Limonetique as sponsor of the webinar. Big thanks to Marcia and Christophe as our presenters and speakers on the session today. Thanks also to MPE, to Philip and the rest of the team. And just a reminder that the webinar, as well as a copy of the presentation, will be made available for everyone who's registered for this webinar. So thank you very much, and wish you all a very good week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
It's been great talking to you. And guys, if you have any questions, ping Christoph or myself on LinkedIn. We'll come back to you. I mean, there's been some questions about the sources of statistics, so happy to share that. And may I say, this has been one of the most enjoyable webinars, because there's been so many questions. Thank you very much, guys, because it just brings the conversation to life.
Thank you indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Ciao.
Bye.